6 o'clock, and I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, candidates. I'm just going to do sort of introductions and what we're doing tonight and what's upcoming and rebroadcast. Just I'll try to get that through that real briefly. This is a candidate forum, the League of Women Voters. We decided this year the Cheyenne League would focus on some key county races. We're not doing them all. We just have limited resources, but we think we're doing the races that sort of have the most interest and activity this year. Yesterday we had the forum for the county commission candidates. Tonight we're doing the district attorney, county clerk, and sheriff, and then tomorrow we're doing legislative races that will be on Laramie County ballots. And so, I'll get into we're streaming this live, and people will be able to link to the live streaming by going to the homepage of the county. We're going to post them on archive them on the League of Women Voters website. And then Channel 19 here in Town Charter is going to rebroadcast them. And I'll get to the dates later on that. So this should be get a lot of wide distribution. We hope that the whole point of this is that, as the League banner up there says, be informed and vote. We want candidates to know who's running, what their issues are. And what we hope tonight is to find some differences between the candidates, something that voters can decide on. The primary is August 19th, and early voting starts tomorrow. If you mark your calendars, and then the primary will reduce. Now tonight we have both of our district attorney candidates are Republicans. Only one will go forward to the general election. There is no Democratic candidate, so the primary will be the election. So everybody, don't miss the primary, because that's where a lot of decisions will be made. Encourage you to do that. If you have questions for the three races tonight, please write them down on a card, and then League members will take up the cards and bring them up here, and we will get to them as we can. Briefly, the format tonight is this. There will be 2-minute openings by the candidates. They can use it any way they want. We hope they'll use at least part of it to introduce themselves, maybe cover their qualifications, that sort of thing. The League of Women Voters has a series of questions that have been given to the candidates ahead of time. They'll have 1.5 minutes to answer those. And then there will be an opportunity, optional, after those. The candidates can raise their hand if they want to add something or rebut or whatever. They can use a couple of seconds to amplify what they've said or respond. And then at the end, there will be 2-minute closings. And again, the candidates can use them any way they want to sum up, to add what they've said, to respond to what the other candidate has said. Then we will move on to the county clerk's race. Let's see. So I guess at this and the timer, we have one of League member here who's going to be holding up cards. So we hope the candidates, from your peripheral vision, you can keep track of that. So we have a card for 30 seconds, yellow, an orange card, 15, and the shocking pink card says stop. So we'll give you a chance to finish your statement, but we're going to try to move along tonight, so we'll be probably keeping good track of you there. And I will go, the rebroadcast dates are for Channel 19. The forum from last night, County Commissioners, will be rebroadcast Saturday, July 12th at 11 a.m. The forums tonight will be rebroadcast on Sunday, the 13th at 11 a.m. And the forums for tomorrow night, the legislative races, will be on Tuesday, July 15th at 6 p.m. And we have the dates and times written out on a piece of paper outside in the hallway that you can refer to if you want to. And also the tables in the hallway are available for candidates to leave their materials. So if you have more information on one of the candidates, please go pick up some of the materials. And my name is Marguerite Herman. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. I'm their state lobbyist, but also a member of the Active League here in Cheyenne. So we'll go ahead and get started, and starting with 2-minute statements, and then we'll sort of alternate who starts first. So we'll start tonight with Scott Homar, the incumbent district attorney.
Thank you very much, Marguerite. As she said, I'm Scott Homar. I've been your district attorney now for 7.5 years. It's 2 terms. Before that, I was in private practice, law firm Hickey & Evans, which I became a partner. Before that, I worked at the Laramie County District Attorney's Office for 5.5 years, doing everything from juvenile work, misdemeanor work, on all the way up to very serious felonies. Before that, I obviously went to law school at the University of Wyoming, and before that, I worked as a forensic scientist in the Wyoming State Crime Laboratory for 3 years. And I guess I'm going backwards, but it was 1989 that I got my undergraduate degree. So I guess I'll just start off by saying that I would like to be your district attorney again for a myriad of reasons, but number one, I want to continue with the positive changes that I've made over the last 7.5 years. When I first took this office, as you probably know, there are a lot of moving parts to the criminal justice system, and the district attorney's office is a very large cog in that machine. Relationships when I first took office with all the entities we deal with had really severely broken down. Juveniles were kind of the last priority in the office. Crime rates had been on the rise since 2000. Victim care was not anywhere near where it needed to be. So I made those my primary goals, and I'd just like to say I've had tremendous success in those areas. Filling my victim witness position with one of the best people I possibly could. We serve victims very well now, although we could use some more people in that area. We have reduced juvenile arrests, we've reduced crime rates overall, and I've mended those relationships that I talked about.
Thank you. Mr. Sandburg, 2 minutes.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this event tonight. My name is Jeremiah Sandburg. This is the first event I've been to where I got to sit down, so I'm not sure this joke will work. But normally I start off by telling people the answers to the top 3 questions I receive out on the campaign trail. I'm 6'9". I don't play basketball after 2 major knee operations, and the wind up here is the weather up here is just as windy as the rest of the state. I am Jeremiah Sandburg, and I am running for district attorney. My wife and I moved back to Laramie County here in 2007 when we got done with law school for me, and my wife finished her residency. We came back to this part of the country because we'd both been raised out in this area of the country, and we wanted to get back to someplace good to raise our family and be with good people. Since coming back to Wyoming, I've worked for both the Goshen and presently the Platte County Attorney's offices as a prosecutor. I went up there because I wanted to be in a small office where I could do everything right out the gate. And I believe that county attorney's office, one of the disadvantages you have is that they don't have time to baby you. They throw you right into everything and you either sink or you swim. I think I did pretty good. I don't have quite the experience my opponent does, but I do think there are things that we've done up there in the counties that we could bring here and do better. Having lived here since 2007, since my opponent took over, I guess I have a little bit different take on how things are going. We saw how things were, and I see where they are now. And when I speak to the different stakeholders involved, I think that things have not improved as much as they should have done. And in some areas, they've regressed. And so I think we need to have a contested election. And at the end of the election, I guess you'll make a decision whether you agree with me or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we'll enter the questioning part of this, and we'll start with Mr. Sandburg. Again, you'll have 1.5 minutes, and then when everyone's done, you'll have a brief opportunity if you want something to add. So the first question is, do you believe the District Attorney's Office has sufficient staffing and resources to manage its present workload?
Well, what I see right now is a lot of practices that I would consider to be that cause them to be inefficient. And I think that where we do adopt more efficient practices, that I think that we do have enough resources in Manning to handle the current caseload. When we talk about caseloads, if you compared the caseload here in Laramie County compared to some of the other counties, and you compare man-hour to man-hour spent, there's a lot of counties around the state have a lot higher caseload per man-hour that they can spend on cases than here in Laramie County. And yet here in Laramie County, as my opponent said in a recent interview, they are triaging cases. I think a lot of that is self-inflicted due to the policies of the office. So I think if we change policies to policies that I'm used to, like open files, open records, open door policies, things that that make a lot of sense. I think that we can make do with the resources we have without adding any more people. One of the things I'd like to see happen is audits of time. You know, if we're out in private practice, we have to keep track of our time. I think that as prosecutors, we need to keep track of our time as well. And if we can demonstrate that we are being as real good stewards of that time and that we need more people, we can use those time audits to demonstrate that need and go back to legislature and demonstrate that case.
Thank you. Mr. Homar.
Thank you. I can tell you that we have not had a state-funded new position since, I believe, 2004, since 3 years before I took office. At that time, the office was treading water. We receive in our office a little over 4,700 cases every year. That's as of 2013. This number is down, I must say, since 2007. As far as the index crimes are concerned, crime is down since 2007, 15% in Laramie County. Even in light of that, we were treading water then. We're treading water now. I have managed to add, through grant funding, attorneys to deal with specific issues in Laramie County, issues such as drug crimes, issues such as domestic violence and domestic violence victim care. Even in light of that, we still have a difficult time managing. You know, much of our success and the reasons that we are doing well in Laramie County right now are because of specialized courts and other programs that take a lot of time and a lot of man hours. But they're successful programs, and I think we should keep doing those programs. I have asked for positions before. I have not received them from the legislature. I will continue to ask for where I think we need to allocate those resources.
Thank you. And now I guess we'll alternate. Mr. Homar will start with our second question. Do you endorse the concept of a drug court, which you've kind of touched on there? Why or why not?
I absolutely do. As far as prosecution is concerned, you know, it's not cookie cutter stuff. And research has shown that the more attention you can give to an offender, the better. And drug courts, as well as other specialty courts, work. There's just no question about it. The recidivism rate with regard to drug court is essentially this. 80% of people that go into drug court complete it. 80% of those who complete it never get arrested for anything again. And that's essentially as of when drug court started. They are very intensive programs, as they need to be. We don't need a bunch of drug addicts in prison. We know that. It takes a lot of work for a drug addict to get into prison. Occasionally it happens. We give them every chance to succeed. But again, the graduates have a very low recidivism rate, and we need more programs like that. Again, those are man hours. We do have a DUI court program. I have instituted in my office a veterans court program to deal with veterans who might get themselves afoul of the law. And those are generally veterans with PTSD or traumatic brain injuries. And so that's another successful program that we have instituted. Again, very intensive, but best results.
Thank you. Mr. Sandburg, drug courts, for, against, and why?
Well, I am also very much for them, and I'm not going to go ahead and repeat everything that my opponent just said, but we do have the advantage of having the specialized courts here in Laramie County. That's not an advantage we have out in the rural counties. We have to make do with things like split sentences and trying to structure a program around a split sentence, which I understand we don't do a lot of here, if anything. In referral to the drug court in particular, I'd like to actually push to see it expanded. I think that we miss opportunities with 301 deferrals that we could be using in the drug courts to take advantage of that deferral and prevent the person from getting a felony. Right now, the drug court only applies to felony level crimes, and you may have a deferral there, but it's still a felony level crime. The legislation that creates the drug courts also allow you to do juvenile cases. I have to say that with the intense supervision you have with the drug court, that would be very useful to have in juvenile cases, because when you have a juvenile that's an offender, they really need that extra kick sometimes to be successful. Short of something like that, typically we end up having to send them off to an institution somewhere. And I'd prefer to keep them in the community. If you can be successful in the community, the recidivism for juveniles is much, much better than if you have to send them off somewhere. So I'd like to see the drug courts expanded to include those two areas as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And we'll start with you on the third question. And again, this kind of leads into that, but are there sufficient alternatives to incarceration for youthful offenders?
When you say youthful offenders, I'm not sure if you're talking about juveniles or young adults. And in either case, in young adults, I don't think there is anything specifically for young adults here in the community. For talking to probation and parole, it seems like we have pretty much the same programs that would be available to any adult, and so it doesn't seem like there's any particular extra thing here in the community that we use with them. For juveniles, I think we're missing some things in the community that other communities have to keep them out of incarceration. Generally, when you're talking about a juvenile, though, and you're talking about incarceration, you're not talking about locking them up like you would an adult. You're talking about sending them off for some sort of corrective treatment, either addiction treatment or corrective thinking treatment, so that we can get them back home into the community. One of the advantages that we have in Torrington is we do have a day treatment center where we can do a lot of that right there in the community. My understanding is we don't have anything like that here in Cheyenne, and I'm not sure the DA's office can push for that, but certainly if that were to become available, I think we would want to utilize that as much as possible. And in terms of juveniles in particular, one of my concerns is that we've had a 141% increase in juvenile delinquency petitions since my opponent took over. I'd like to see that number go back down again.
Thank you. Mr. Homar, alternatives to incarceration for youthful offenders?
Certainly. I think in Laramie County we're actually doing a very, very fine job. Incarceration, whether it's at a detention facility or any other placement, is a last resort. And there's been a huge shift since I took office 7 or 8 years ago to do everything we can to keep the juveniles in the community. We provide wraparound services for the entire family, and that's why you're seeing, if there is an increase in these cases, and I don't necessarily believe there is in juvenile delinquency cases. Maybe in juvenile cases overall, there's an increase, but I think that's where we want to take care of our problems in juvenile court before they become adult offenders. So I'm not so sure about that 141% number, but if there is an increase in juvenile cases, it is because of some things that we are doing better than we used to do. That is communicating with schools, taking kids that are problematic into the juvenile system when necessary. We also now make sure that if we had a kid in neglect court and now they're acting out, they're going to juvenile court as well. So we are taking kids in to deal with them where we should deal with them, not waiting till they become adult offenders. And I think we're doing a very good job of that in Laramie County. Actually, placements of children are down, last number I heard, 38% since 2007.
Right. Thank you. We'll begin again with you, Mr. Homar, for the number 4 question, which is, what are the top 3 programs or projects that would be your focus in the event you are reelected?
Yes, like I said before, I think we've come a long way, but there's certainly more to do, and I can't say that we've done everything perfectly. We have to do things with the resources that we have at the time. But what I'd like to see in the future, and if you're just talking about top 3, I'd like to see more specialty courts. And the reason for that is that they're successful, as I said before. I'd like to institute, if we could, a domestic violence court. Because right now, first offenders of domestic violence are generally receiving probation, and it's unsupervised, and they may have contact with the victim, and they may violate their probation conditions, and no one would ever know. So a DV court, like the drug court, as intensive as it is, would be a very good tool, especially for individuals, like I said, first-time offenders that are maybe looking to avoid losing their gun rights and have a significant incentive to do well in that kind of a court. I'd also like to work on a restorative justice project which couples victims with their offenders so that everyone can get closure to a case, and we can reduce recidivism as well in that manner. It's been shown to work. And I'd like to do more community outreach. We do a lot. We do law enforcement training. We do fraud prevention and vulnerable adult protection type training, but I'd like to do more of that.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Sandburg.
Thank you. And I think this is one of the questions where we're going to see a big divergence of opinion here. Since I began working as a prosecutor, I've heard a lot of complaints here at the home turf about the concerns about the office not corresponding as required with victims and witnesses. I think that most people aren't even made aware that there is a victim and witness bill of rights. And I've talked to a lot of victims now who were never even spoken to about their case prior to the case being pled out. Some of them had to read about it in the press to know that their case was taken care of. So I think the first thing we need to do is work on adopting policies that absolutely guarantee the victim and witness bill of rights. Second of all, I think we need to rebuild relations with law enforcement, victim advocacy groups, the courts, and of course the defense bar. While I don't work here with the local defense bar directly, they come up and work with me up in Platte and Goshen counties. So I know most of the defense bar, and one of the big complaints that we have is all the games that are played with the office down here, and they'd like to see that end. So we need to rebuild those relations. And finally, we need to establish more efficient practices so that we can move this caseload through the office more quickly and get on top of it without necessarily having to add any more resources. The reason these are my top 3 priorities is because I believe that they're the foundation to get to my chief goal, which is to get tougher on crimes of violence, crimes against children, and crimes against the elderly and disabled.
Thank you. And I just realized I haven't, I promised I'd give you all an opportunity to respond or rebut or add, and I haven't done that, so I'll do that now. Does either one of you want to comment further?
Well, maybe, Marguerite, if we could just have a little extra time at the end of the 2 minutes, when we get that 2-minute closing to talk about some of those points, we could do that.
We're flexible here. We can consolidate the response time at the before or after the 2 minutes. We can do that. That's fine if you prefer. We're easy to get along with here. If that's agreeable, that's wonderful. Okay. So I guess we'll begin again with Mr. Sandburg. With the 5th question is, what would be your policy regarding deferrals in domestic violence cases, in DUI cases based on blood alcohol tests, and in nonviolent felony cases?
That's almost a 3-part question. So
It is 3-part, absolutely.
Well, first of all, I would say that I adopt the second chance theory for deferrals. Each one of us could make a mistake and end up on the wrong side of the law going home tonight. We'd be not paying attention to what we're doing and end up in an accident or something. And so I think the second chance theory would apply here. Anybody can make a mistake, but if you're going to give a deferral, first of all, there has to be an acknowledgement of the wrongdoing. Second of all, there has to be acceptance of personal responsibility. There has to be restitution paid if it's owed in that particular type of a case. The person has to undergo counseling and rehabilitation as part of that deferral plan. And they must live by the rules and live a law-abiding life. I also think that deferral should only happen once. We shouldn't be getting multiple deferrals. And deferral should only happen if it really is truly your first offense. We shouldn't be saying, okay, let's use it down the line after you had a whole bunch of offenses. And these policies would apply to each one of those 3 situations. Now, in particular to the drug and alcohol addiction cases, I think that a deferral is an opportunity to help that person get the treatment they need up front if they have an addiction problem. And I see right now those deferrals being generally wasted. They are unsupervised probation. There's no real requirements other than on your honor, we'll be good. And I like to see us do ASIs before we give the deferral, and then if they have an addiction problem, make sure they follow through with treatment on the back end of that.
Thank you. Mr. Homar.
Yes, certainly in this jurisdiction, besides the second chance doctrine, deferrals are a necessary tool to manage the caseload. But every case has its own facts and circumstances. Every person is their own person and have their own background and circumstances. And so every decision on a deferral is going to be based on those very special set of circumstances. I do not have, as the district attorney, any specific never a deferral policy. I expect my very experienced and well-trained attorneys to hand out deferrals on a basis that is in line with what I feel is appropriate. And I think that happens only because I review every potential 301 deferral that goes through the office. Again, it's going to be different based upon a myriad of factors as to whether it's appropriate or not. And I do not have a never policy on any of the three mentioned areas.
All righty, thank you. Let me see. We have one more question that I guess can be answered briefly, I'm hoping, but we did submit it to you, and we'll go ahead and I guess start with Mr. Homar. Would you be willing to prosecute violations of open meetings and public records laws?
I certainly would prosecute any crime that is on the books and that we need to prosecute. Of course, with regard to open meetings and the Open Meetings Act, it comes down to some, again, very fact-specific issues. If there was an obvious and willful violation of the Open Meetings Act, certainly I would prosecute. If it's a difficult question, as it has been in the past, a question that has had to go to the Supreme Court as to whether it was such a violation, I can't in good conscience say I'm going to file charges when we need to go to the Supreme Court to determine if it's in fact a violation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sandburg.
Thank you. And that's almost a trick question because I say that because the legislature changed the rules back in 2012 regarding open meetings and open records. In regards to both, they did away with the specific criminal penalty for violations of those acts and replaced it with a civil penalty. In regards to public record violations, it is the civil penalty is the exclusive penalty that can only be brought by the Attorney General or the county attorney. So as a district attorney, I would not have the authority to bring a criminal case for violations of open records. In regards to open meetings, however, it is not the civil penalty is not the exclusive remedy. There is the possibility of criminal prosecution if it's a violation under Title VI, and most probably it'd be a violation of official misconduct, which has two subparts. You would have to be able to demonstrate that the person intentionally violated the rules for personal gain, monetary gain, or to intentionally maliciously harm another, or they intentionally failed to perform a duty in the time and manner specified. Because there is that additional element you have to prove intent, that's a higher standard than I think was previously there. It's still only a fine, but a little bit later down in the statutes we find out that upon conviction, that individual shall be removed from office. And if a person is intentionally violating the law and you can demonstrate that, I think it should be prosecuted, because if you have an official who's not following the law, they should be removed from office.
Okay, thank you. And we do have several questions. Again, I'll just repeat, if those who came in late, that if we can't get to your question tonight, we will definitely put them in the question bank to be used for an online voter's guide. So we're not going to discard anything we get tonight. Just let you know that we're limited by time, and we'll get to everything we can. And interestingly, several questions about people have asked the same thing, so we'll do a little consolidation here. But there's been a lot of talk, especially on your part, Mr. Sandburg, about the crime rates. And I'm guessing, to what extent can a district attorney be held responsible for a crime rate in a county?
I think that's an excellent question, because I'm not sure that the district attorney's office really has any direct connection to the crime rates unless you're removing the individual from the community. Now, over a long term, maybe you can start to see a pattern, but the pattern that we've seen here, when my opponent talks about the index crimes, what we're really talking about is a decrease in misdemeanor larceny. When you look at the other index crimes, most of them are right around where they've always been, or they're up. And so I'm not sure that the DA's office really has that direct effect, particularly on misdemeanor larceny, when that correlates much more with the changes that the police department made back in 2010, including bringing in a new chief of police. So I do question what a direct effect the DA's office has had in this regard.
Thank you. And Mr. Homar.
Well, I guess I would have to disagree with Mr. Sandburg. I think the district attorney's office can have a pretty significant impact over the long run on crime rates, and that's about being proactive in the community. And proactive things are things like other programs I've instituted, such as juvenile diversion program, which is essentially an educational type of neglect program we get kids when they're 7, 8, and 9 years old that may not be making it to school, and in conjunction with the Department of Family Services, I have a DFS worker in my office that deals with those families and puts them through this diversion program. And I instituted that 7 years ago, 7.5 years ago, and now those kids are 14, 15, 16, and we're seeing a significant reduction in juvenile arrests. We're seeing a significant reduction in juvenile placements, and believe it or not, we're seeing a reduction in the crime rates.
Thank you. And the next question, we've had a few here that questions about trial experience, specifically felony trial experience. And so I guess we'll start with Mr. Homar. What is your trial record, your trial experience leading to this office?
Marguerite, I couldn't give you numbers of felony jury trials that I've done, especially since I was at the district attorney's office 5.5 years prior to becoming district attorney. And since becoming district attorney 7.5 years ago, I'm not quite sure of the number. It would be probably 60 or 70, maybe not quite that many. I know I did. You do a lot and then you don't do a few for a few months or any for a few months. But in any case, I have lost one felony jury trial since I've been a prosecuting attorney in the almost 13 years I've been doing this.
Thank you. Mr. Sandburg, this goes to your experience
Sure.
as a prosecutor.
Well, and I think that if we're talking about quantity of experience, certainly my opponent has me beat here, but if we're talking about quality, again, I think that coming into the office, we had relatively similar backgrounds. He had 5.5 years of experience in the district attorney's office. My understanding is that 3 of those were doing juvenile work, which leaves him about 2.5 to be doing the criminal work. I've been doing 4 years of everything. So I think coming into the office, we're fairly similar in terms of a background and experience. In terms of particular trial work, I couldn't tell you exactly what my experience or win-loss ratio is. I've done more jury trials on the misdemeanor side than I have on the felony side, because that's just the way they worked out. We don't end up doing a lot of jury trials in the county, partly because of the practices that we engage in that don't require them. We do a lot of pretrial work before we get there, and we get the things sorted out before we end up going to trial. So I think that is a good question to have regarding experience. But again, I would say look at the quantity versus the quality. The other thing I would point out is that my idea for how the office should be run is a little different than my opponent's. I think that if you're truly going to be tough on crime and run an office as the politician, it's nearly impossible to do both without burning out. And so I would anticipate having the chief prosecutor being somebody with a lot of trial experience, and I would do something less down the ladder.
Thank you very much. And I will start again with Mr. Sandburg. Let me see. Got some very, very good ones. What are your thoughts about prosecuting crimes against children? How many trials, and this kind of goes to that, but from your background, have you prosecuted involving victims under the age of 15? So it sounds like, whether the children are not the defendant, but the victim.
Maybe you can restate the question.
Okay, sure. What are your thoughts about prosecuting crimes against children? How many cases, trials have you prosecuted involving a victim under the age of 15?
Again, I couldn't tell you that number. I know I've done a number of those cases. And when we talk about prosecuting, you're talking about both a crime that may have occurred, or you may be talking about a parent who stepped over the line. And we're now talking about abuse and neglect case in the juvenile side, or you might be talking about a simple misdemeanor, depending on the facts and background. One of my goals when I said I'd take a step down the ladder is that I personally think that one of the inefficiencies in the office is we have 2 prosecutors handling those types of cases. You have one doing the abuse and neglect cases, and on the other side you might have a different attorney doing the criminal part of that case. And that, to me, is inefficient. You should have the same prosecutor handling both sides of that case, because otherwise you have the same defense attorneys, you have the same guardian ad litems, you have the same victim advocates involved, you have oftentimes the same judge involved in the case, and yet we're splitting up the attorneys, and I don't think that's efficient. I think we can correct that right away by just having me, the DA, take over all those cases, and I would like to handle all of the cases involving a child victim, because I think it's very important.
Hey, Mr. Homar? You want me to repeat the question? Or
No, I think
okay.
I remember it.
Right.
Do I think it's important to prosecute cases with child victims? Yes, that's why that's the majority of my caseload, and the majority of the caseload for my next most experienced attorney. And we do that very successfully. These are incredibly difficult cases to prosecute and to successfully prosecute. And I guess I still haven't heard from my opponent whether he's successfully prosecuted a felony jury trial. But in any case, I have never lost a felony jury trial involving a child sexual abuse case. And I do those routinely. Those are the majority of my caseload. And they're incredibly difficult because a lot of times what you have is you have a child that said something happened and you have a grown man that said something didn't happen. And that's the extent of your case, and you have to build it from there. And I deal with those kids from ages 3 up to 16 on a daily basis. And I make it a very, very important part of my practice in the office. With regard to doing the juvenile cases and the, I guess, adult criminal cases the same way, I don't really think my opponent has a real grasp on the volume of cases that we deal with in my office and what it takes to actually prosecute a significant caseload like we do. Most of my felony attorneys have 60 to 70 felony cases they're dealing with at any one time.
Thank you. And I will start again with you, Mr. Homar. Have you or will you change your policy on marijuana prosecutions since, and I assume this would be possession, since Colorado legalized?
Certainly not. It's still illegal in Wyoming, and we prosecute those even with misdemeanor amounts that are traveling from Colorado or caught in Laramie County with amounts. Unless the legislature makes a change, which I do not believe they should, I will continue to prosecute those cases.
Okay. Mr. Sandburg.
I guess I would have to agree with my opponent here. I don't see any reason that we should be changing our policy on that. Certainly, I would not encourage the legislature to do so. I think the rules currently allow for a lot of flexibility depending on the situation for how you handle that sort of a case, whether it's a first offense young kid or whether it's somebody taking 40 pounds of pot across the state. You have a lot of flexibility there to determine who you're dealing with and what the outcome in that case should be. So I do not think that I would encourage any change to the policies at this point.
All right, thank you. And we're sort of getting to the end of this, but we have time for a couple more, and I'll start with Mr. Sandburg. This has to do with your budget from spending for the DA's office from the county. Whether, and I'll just read the question. Departments receiving money from the county budget come in and discuss and defend their budget requests. Would you be willing to come defend your budget requests before the county commissioners? That's the question. And I guess you could clarify how the district attorney's office gets funded. I think there's state funds. Anyway, I'm sorry. We'll just proceed.
Sure, and there's multiple sources of funding. One of the sources is the county for building, and the county also funds the monies for the trials over in the district court. From speaking to several of the county commissioners and some of the county observers, my understanding is the DA's office does not currently come defend those budget requests or in any way try to justify those expenses. And I believe that's something that we should do. As a county attorney, we have to do that all the time. And so I'm constantly having to answer to to the commission and justify what it is we're doing and why we're requesting a certain amount of monies. I think as a DA's office, you should do that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Homar.
Well, I guess I should say first and foremost, we don't request anything from the counties. The counties are required by statute to provide suitable office space. I believe that's the exact wording in the statute for the district attorney's office in both Laramie and Natrona counties, and they do that. There's, as far as I'm concerned, really nothing to defend. I have to go to the county commissioners occasionally and say, we need another office. We've had to take a couple of offices down on the first floor because we expanded our victim witness service, and we needed some space for that, and they've graciously accommodated, as well as for a file storage room down on the first floor. But again, I have to justify to the county commissioners that I need office space, and it's suitable office space for me to carry out my job, and I've done that in the past. But they are required by statute to provide suitable office space, and I think they do that, and we've never really had a problem. Thank you.
All right, we'll do one more question, and then we'll move into the closings. The question is, what is the most difficult case to prosecute and why? And I will start with Mr. Homar again.
Well, I've touched on the child sexual abuse cases, and I do believe those are probably top two. But what you'll also find prosecuting cases is that the domestic violence cases are some of the most difficult to prosecute. In no other type of case do you generally have a victim that may recant, that may not want to cooperate, and that's why we give significant training to our attorneys as well as law enforcement agencies. We bring people in from outside to teach courses in this, because you essentially have to treat a domestic violence case like it's a homicide case. Like, you will never have your victim to testify, and you should build your case that way. From the law enforcement investigation, day one, on up, and use specialized investigation techniques to do so. And then when you get to prosecution, you expect to not have your victim there to testify, but it's about protecting these victims who may not want to be protected, or may want to be protected but have no ability to protect themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Sandburg, difficult cases.
I think here we would definitely agree that any case involving family member is going to be the hardest type of case to prosecute, whether it's an abuse and neglect case, whether it's a sexual abuse case, or whether it's a domestic violence type of case. Because again, even with kids, they don't necessarily want to have to testify against a parent or a relative. When you have a domestic violence case, of course, you have a spouse that's probably not going to want to testify when you get to trial. And for law enforcement, I understand that this is also one of the most difficult cases for them to investigate when out in the field. When they go into a domestic violence situation, this is one of the most dangerous things they can do. They have no idea what they're walking into. And so they really do need that specialized training to get in there, defuse the situation, assess the situation, make sure that they are not in danger, make sure nobody else is in immediate danger, and then begin that investigation. So I realize that for law enforcement, a lot of times they're inclined to just get in and get out, but that's why we need that special training for them to know how to handle those situations better, so they can put together that case. Because I'd say about 50% of the time you're not going to have your primary victim testifying at trial, and you have to be able to go forward with that case despite your victim even getting up and saying, it didn't happen, I wasn't ever hurt.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to move into closing, and as we kind of agreed informally, I think instead of just 2 minutes, we'll expand that maybe so that you can use your 2 minutes maybe to respond to specifics of what your opponent has said. We'll give you 3 minutes so you can sum up, and then you use that extra minute if you want to address certain topics that we've covered tonight that you want to draw distinctions or amplify on. And we'll start with Mr. Sandburg.
Well, thank you. And again, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this event tonight. And for everybody who came out to listen to us, this is probably a fairly dry conversation compared to the next one that's coming up. I'm going to touch on crime rates again because my opponent keeps wanting to talk about these. And I think the first thing I'd like to draw a distinction is that he keeps referring to 2007. That was his first year in office. And discounting the crime rate versus his first year, that'd be like Barack Obama saying that we shouldn't count all that debt that he got his first year of office. And he's doing better than then. If we take a real comparison, which would be 2006 and prior to now, the crime rates in the county are only down about 8% across the board. And that's almost all exclusively attributable to the decrease in larceny rates here in Cheyenne. On the county, they're up. But in Cheyenne, we see a really big decrease in larceny rates. Again, if you look at the index, that's primarily bicycle thefts, shoplifting, gas drive-offs is how it's described. If you look at the other crime rates, Burglaries up 10%, aggravated assault and battery is up 67%, domestic violence is up over 50%, and again, juvenile delinquency petitions, as recorded by the fiscal years in the district court, are up 141% since he took office. So again, if he wants to take credit for the crime rates, he needs to take credit for all of the crime, not just the ones that happen to make him look good. I think that there's a better way of doing things, folks, and when I deal with local bar council up in the counties, we just have a different way of doing things. We have open doors, we have open files, we have open policies, so that the instant an attorney comes into the case, they have everything I have. And when you don't play games with evidence, you don't end up doing a lot of the work that I see happening here so that people get their evidence. When you don't try to bully and push around defendants, they're a lot more amenable to actually hearing what you have to say. When you work and cooperate with law enforcement right from the beginning, when you work and you cooperate with your victims right from the beginning, you don't end up having them do a lot of things that I've heard complaints about, like not wanting to testify or coming back later and being mad at you. You do all that stuff up front, you end up having to do less work on the back end, and I call it the maintenance approach versus the if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach. If you're out in the field and you're doing ain't broke, don't fix it, your machinery is going to break down when you need it most. If you're doing preventive maintenance up front, your machinery is going to be strong to carry you all the way through. And that's the approach I'd like to take as the district attorney, is the preventive maintenance approach. Because once you can start taking that approach, then I think you can really achieve the goal, which is to be tough on crime. And I guess I would disagree with my opponent here again. He promised to be tough on crime. He started off tough on crime. I don't think he knew how to get there and maintain it. And I think that's why we're in the position we're in.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll give you 3 minutes, Mr. Homar, to use as you wish.
Thank you, Marguerite, and thank the League of Women Voters as well. I guess I want to jump right in here because we have been tough on crime. In fact, it's real easy to come in and run for district attorney and say you're going to be tougher on crime. The hard part is actually seeing results, and what we're seeing over the last 7 years are results. Take 2006, that's fine, crime's down since 2006. I took office in January 2007. Of course, it takes a little while for your policies to go into effect and to start working. Since 2008, crime is down 15%. Index crime's down 15%. They continue to rise from 2000 to 2008, up 11% in that time, now down 15% since 2008. I'd like to take issue a little bit with my opponent with regarding victim care, because one of the priorities I had in taking office to make sure victims were taken care of. I brought in a victim witness coordinator. I've brought in another grant victim witness assistant. We have someone from the Safe House that works in our office to deal with domestic violence victims. Where we had one, we now have 3. And it's through no help from the state legislature, I might add. That's from me working hard and having people work hard to keep up with grant requirements. We instituted a Victim Bill of Rights dissemination program where we would give all the police officers and all law enforcement officers a card to give any victim, so they are informed of their rights right up front. We created a victim feedback form for every crime so that those are sent out to victims of crimes and they can send them back in and tell us what worked well and what didn't, so we can continue to improve. And that was not in place when I took office. I assume over the 4,700 or so cases we deal with in a year, and I've been doing this now for 7.5, there's going to be 7 or 8 or 9 people that are going to go talk to Mr. Sandburg and say, you know what, we weren't treated the way we needed to be treated. But I can tell you that that is certainly not the majority, and very likely a very minimum few people. My victim witness area takes care of our victims, and we have significant notes in our computers to show that. My opponent talks about things like expanding the drug court and taking care of cases up front, and that things are inefficient and we should give discovery right away, right when we have it. What he doesn't or hasn't passed along, he may understand, but hasn't passed along, is prosecutors don't get reciprocal discovery if you just give discovery. And what that means is the defense attorney has to ask for discovery, you give them the discovery, then you can get reciprocal discovery, but you can't otherwise.
All righty, very good. I appreciate the expanded that you used the last 3 minutes to really draw some distinctions between you two, which is what the voters, I think, are looking for to make a decision. And so thank you very much. Thank you, everyone who came. Thank you, everyone who's streaming this online. Thank you, everyone who submitted questions. We will use them on the online voters guide. So if we didn't get to your question tonight, we will make use of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Forums will be rebroadcast by charter, the Channel 19. The County Commission yesterday will be rebroadcast Saturday, July 12th at 11 a.m. The forums from tonight, District Attorney, County Clerk, and Sheriff will be broadcast on Sunday at the 13th at 11 a.m. And the legislative races tomorrow will be rebroadcast on Tuesday, July 15th at 6 p.m. A reminder that we are going to have forums on July 28th and 29th for 3 statewide offices. On the 28th will be Secretary of State and Superintendent of Public Instruction. On the 29th will be the governor's race. And those, again, will be streamed live. You'll find the link on the homepage for the county government. All forums will be posted, archived on League of Women Voters website, which you can see is www.wyominglwv.org. And we will also make the recordings available for local cable TV, like we're doing here in Cheyenne. We'll make them available anywhere around the state. So we'll do what we can to make sure when people go to the polls, they have the information they need to make a good choice. And tonight, next up is County Clerk, and we thought we had 2 candidates lined up for this evening, and we don't. The incumbent, Debbie Lathrop, is here, however. So what we wanted to do, because this is information for the voters, is give her a chance to answer the questions which we gave out earlier, and she can will go ahead and do the timing and use the same format as before, but it'll be just Debbie, and we're missing Mr. Reif, but I think we'll get a lot of information that Debbie Lathrop have a chance to answer. Again, the format is 2 minutes to open, the questions, 1.5 minutes, and a closing 2 minutes. And and again, also, if you have questions to ask in the county clerk's race, we have 3x5 cards. We have league members. We'll collect them up and bring them up here. If we can't get to your questions, they will definitely be used for the online voter's guide. So we'll start, I guess. Welcome, Ms. Lathrop. So we'll start with a 2-minute introduction, which you can use to introduce yourself and cover whatever topics you want there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marguerite. Well, my name is Debbie Lathrop. I have been county clerk since 1995, and that sounds like a very, very long time. But when you're sitting in my shoes, it hasn't been that long. I love this job. I have a passion for it, and it's challenging. It's educational. I learn something every day. Sometimes it's frustrating, but overall, it's something I truly, truly do enjoy doing. One of the things I like most is helping people that, particularly in auto titles, where somebody lost a spouse. That's a hard thing to go through. And then they're confronted with this nightmare of paperwork. And that's kind of something that I've really enjoyed in the last few years, is helping. I guess because I'm aging, I now have a more of an affinity and patience. We've got a lot of things on the horizon. That's one of the reasons I decided to run again, is that it wouldn't be fair for me to dump my projects, my pet projects, on people and just walk away and say, hey, have fun completing these. I do want to see them to completion, and hopefully they'll be good ones.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the questions the League has prepared. First one, do you believe that the real estate department in the county clerk's office has adequate staff and resources to handle the number of landmen researching mineral titles? A minute and a half.
You know, when methane got to be such a big thing in Johnson County, there was a saying, you couldn't swing a cat without hitting a landman. And I said, well, you know, you could swing a heifer in our office and not hit anything. And then that changed in 2010. All of a sudden, we had the rush of landmen. We had 5, I believe it was, microfilm reader printers. 2 of them were dinosaurs. We weren't really adequately set up. We still had indexes that were in the old tract books from 1985 back to patent. Those are very fragile things. We needed to get those out of the hands of the landmen on such a continuous basis, or they were going to get ruined. So we've made a lot of progress. We now have over 8 reader printers. We've rearranged the office considerably. So we've set up the physical plant the best we can to accommodate them. As far as staffing, the ladies that are in that department know the computer systems, how to do the research, and they're very gracious about helping new people learn that. But they can't do the research themselves. So I think right now we're adequately staffed.
Thank you. Second question, minute and a half. What would be your ideas to increase online access to all of the documents of the records in the clerk's office?
Well, as you know, there's more than just land records in our office. We have county commissioner records. We have title records. The focus should be on the land records. That's where most people are their interest lies, and certainly the landmen would like to have that. We looked into doing that a couple of years ago, and the cost was over $450,000 to scan and put those out there. And it wasn't because of just creating the image and putting it on the internet. It was, you have to attach that to the indexing information. You have to have it attached to the legal description. And when we looked at the computer software that we're currently using and how that would work, it was just cost prohibitive. We then said, okay, we're being encouraged to move off of the mainframe computer to personal computers by our IT department. Let's look at other software options. And we did enter into a contract with Tyler Technologies for a product called Document Pro. And we will be going live with that in September. And that will allow us then to scan all the old records and attach it to the indexes for less than $50,000.
Right, thank you. Third question. Do you think that staff in the clerk's office should assist members of the public who ask for help in preparing deeds and other conveyance documents? Why or why not?
No. A deed or a conveyance, any kind of a document having to do with land, is a legal document, and we're not attorneys. So we have to be very cautious. People are always asking us to help with that, and we have to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't. You know, certainly we don't want to go to jail for practicing law without a license. So, you know, we try to do the best we can, but we have to stop short of saying, here, you need to fill out this quitclaim deed, or you need to do this affidavit of survivorship. We can kind of tell them what we've seen in the past and recommend that they go seek legal advice to follow through.
Okay. And do people generally then go see an attorney and go through do what they need to do and then come back with it in shape for you guys to take care of it?
Yes, that's generally what happens then.
Okay, the fourth question. According to Wyoming Secretary of State, in the U.S. Census data, on Election Day in 2010, there were 43,716 registered voters from among 69,000 county residents of age 18 or over. So registered voters out of all of those eligible, except I guess for the felonies. On Election Day in 2012, there were some 4,700 fewer registered voters. As of June 2nd of this year, there are 40,000 registered voters, so going down. What would you do as county clerk to reach this non-registered block of approximately 30,000 eligible voters?
You know, if all you're doing is trying to get people to register, that doesn't really help the system much. They have to vote. So the more important thing is let's open up the process of voting. Now, Wyoming is extremely fortunate that we are an Election Day voter registration state. So you don't have to be registered 30 days prior to the election. You can come in during the absentee period, which opens tomorrow, up until 14 days prior to the election. You can register or register and cast a ballot. Now, during that last 14 days, you have to do both, register and cast your ballot simultaneously. And then you can go to the polls on Election Day. So one of my pet projects, I drafted a bill for the legislature to consider this last session to create vote centers, to allow Wyoming to do vote centers. That didn't get through because it was a budget session. However, Joint Corporations Committee has taken it on as a committee bill, and I have every belief that it will pass in 2015. And what this will do is there will be a certain number of locations around the county, and people can go to any one of those locations and vote. So they can register and vote on Election Day, not at a specific place pertinent to where they reside, but at any one of 20 or 22 locations around the county. That's the key. Get them in to register and vote. Once they vote, now then they see the importance of continuing.
Is there anything we can do to get people to become electors when they turn 18, when they're just getting out of high school? What can we do to get those people engaged?
We have reached out to the high schools in the past, and sometimes we get good response and sometimes not. But the government teachers that are really interested, they call and they'll say, can we bring our students to get them registered and vote? And we say, absolutely. So we'll set up a time that works for the school. They'll bus them in. We let the election judges, generally they do it through the absentee process, so we let the absentee judges know you're going to be getting a busload of kids from South High or East High or whatever during these hours on this day. And they get prepared, and they're very happy to see those young kids come in and register and vote.
Excellent. What of the many services and responsibilities that fall under the county clerk's statutory charges do you believe need improvement? And what would you propose to do to improve services to Laramie County residents?
Everything we do could be improved. Anytime you say, that's the way we've always done it, it's good enough, then you're not striving to be the best you can. And each division of our office is important to a different group of people. If you're an auto dealer or a lender, you want to make sure that the title department is functioning as effectively as possible and turning your paperwork around right away. If you are a landman, you want to make sure that you have access to the land documents to do your research. If you're interested in what goes on with the Board of County Commissioners, you want to make sure that somebody is there to retrieve the documents from that board. And we've just gone to a scanning system for that, where people within the county don't have to call us and say, can you pull a contract date on this date and make a copy? They can just go see an image of it, and that's helped a lot. If you're a county employee, you want to make sure that payroll department's functioning at the peak and gets those checks out on time, which, you know, we came close about a year ago to not doing that because of our software. So we're always looking at what can be done better and who needs, you know, we had the hailstorm in 2011, and we just got inundated with title work. We went from 650 titles a week to 1,000 titles a week. We couldn't afford to add staff. There was a hiring freeze on. So we had to look at our internal processes. How can we help get that paperwork turned around faster? And we managed to do it we were only about 3 days behind at any given time.
Okay, thank you. That runs through the league questions, so we have a couple from the audience. What experience do you have working with budget preparations, especially with the dollar amount of all involved with Laramie County?
Well, obviously I have almost 20 years experience doing the county budget by now. But prior to that, the last job that I had prior to running for county clerk was I was the project manager for Farb & Stein Company out of Michigan. And they were hired by the Cheyenne Airport Board to do the relocation project for our airport. There were 50 homes that were adjacent to one of the runways that were impacted by noise. And I had multi-million-dollar federal grant and some state grant monies that I was responsible for to purchase those homes, give those people relocation assistance, assist them in buying a new home, and then disposing of the vacated homes for the airport.
Okay, and I think just a question about the voting, going back to that topic. Laramie County is now completely electronic voting, or direct registry. I forgot the title for it, but no paper involved. Can you say how that's working, and what assurances do the voters have that their votes are being recorded and tabulated accurately?
We are all, it's called direct recording equipment, DREs, and it works fabulous. One area that it's terrific in is write-ins. It used to be that on the paper ballots, you had to have the judges sort through the write-ins. We wouldn't even have an idea of if anybody qualified as a write-in until Friday morning right before the canvassing board met. Now with we call them just touch screens, it runs a report. We can just tally those up immediately and let people know if they qualified as a write-in. Now for voter assurance, there's two pieces of paper that the machines generate. There's the one that comes up right after you hit cast a ballot, or you actually print the ballot so you can verify that your choices are what was recorded on the machine before you hit cast ballot. And then internal to each machine is a hard drive that records every vote. And so we can take those machines and hook them up to a laser printer and print out every ballot that was cast on those machines. And then through a random serial number, you never know who voted this particular ballot, but we can compare it to the tapes that are run through and make sure that it's recording the votes accurately.
Have you received any challenges?
To utilizing that equipment?
Yes.
Yes.
How do you handle those?
Well, 2 years ago, there was a claim by a citizen that it was illegal to use just those. And he asked the Secretary of State's office, and of course it says in statute that the determination of the equipment to be used is made at the county level. And there's nothing in our statutes that says you have to use paper. We put in the law several years ago, well, right after the Help America Vote Act passed in 2002, we had to rewrite the election statutes to allow for electronic voting equipment that was different than punch card. Punch card went away, but if you read the statutes, there was all kinds of punching going on in those laws. So we had to clean that up and allow for the more modern equipment.
All righty, well, thank you. And that's really all the questions we have. If you want to take your 2 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. It's in process of the. So it's a mystery who wrote this question. It's completely anonymous. How has working with the 5 commissioners, I guess, instead of just 3, having 5, changed your work?
It really hasn't changed my workload that much. The biggest effect I see with the 5 compared to the 3 is it's more difficult to get direction, and that's really pertinent to their department heads, the road and bridge director, the human resource director, the planning director. We are required to cover all their work sessions. Whenever there's a quorum of the commissioners in a meeting, then the clerk's office has to take minutes. And so we sit there and we see the interaction. And there have been many times when I've seen somebody go in and they have sort of a routine administerial question and they're looking for direction. and they leave there, and I'm pretty sure they don't have any clue more than I do what just happened in there. So you've got 5 people with 5 very diverse opinions, and it's hard to come to any kind of a consensus. And obviously in those work sessions, you're not taking a vote. It's not a formal action, but people are looking for, some idea of how they are to proceed once they leave that work session.
Okay. Thank you. And I think that concludes the question part of this. You can take the final 2 minutes, all or any part of it, to wrap up or address an issue that we haven't covered.
Well, again, thank you for holding this. I think it's very, very important to offer a venue where people can see the candidates and how they compare. I wish that my opponents, and there are 2 of them, had shown up so that you could draw some comparisons. I just want to say that I've got, yes, I've got a lot of years under my belt as county clerk, and I'm getting pretty old, but I'm not used up yet. One of my favorite Beach Boys songs is Still Cruising After All These Years. And that's how I feel. I'm still cruising. And I just want to leave you with this thought. What motivates me is doing the job, not having a title. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's see, at this point, if I don't know how much time we need, maybe 5 minutes, a little break before the sheriff candidates come up. Let's see, it's 7:20, so it's 7:25. We'll get the dais all ready for the. I think we'll go ahead and get going on the final forum for tonight for sheriff's race. So we'll get started on the forum for sheriff, Laramie County Sheriff. Just as a reminder, this is the League of Women Voters. We are nonpartisan, do not promote any one candidate over another. Sometimes we will be issue-oriented and support that, but we are here nonpartisan to help get information about candidates to voters, and so voters can understand what the issues are, the candidates, their differences, and make an informed vote on Election Day. Primary is August 19th. Early voting starts on Thursday. And I'll mention the rebroadcast dates briefly. People are streaming this live. We have a wonderful audience here in person. We will put them on the website for the League of Women Voters, which you can see up there at wyominglwv.org. And we are making the recordings available for cable TV channels anywhere in the state. We are having 2 more forums before the primary for statewide office. July 28th is for Secretary of State and Superintendent of Public Instruction. July 29th is for the governor. Again, those will be streamed live and posted on our website and available for broadcast. If anyone has questions for the sheriff's candidates, we have 3x5 cards. Please write them down and hand them up here. We'll get to them if we can. We'll start out with league questions. We'll get to the public questions. If we can't get to them, we will incorporate them in our online voters guide. And I think that covers everything. We will have the format that we've used previously, which is 2 minutes to open. You can use it to introduce yourself, whatever you want to do there. The questions will be a minute and a half, and I will give you an opportunity if you have something to respond to or add to your own. You can take a few seconds to do that for each question, and at the end you'll have 2 minutes to sum up or add, amplify, however you want to use that final 2 minutes. So if there are no more questions, I think we will get, and if you do think of questions actually during, just go ahead and bring it up as we're going along. Something may occur to you, or something, comment may prompt a question in your mind. So first, welcome the candidates. We have the incumbent, Danny Glick, and another candidate, David Martin. And we're missing the other 2. Actually, there are 3 other candidates in the race. So it'll be, tonight we'll just learn more about these 2 candidates. So go ahead, and I guess we'll start with Sheriff Glick, if you want to take 2 minutes to introduce yourself and get the evening started.
Miss Marguerite, thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters. My name is Danny Glick. I've been in law enforcement for 33 years this month, all of it here in Laramie County. I started back in 1981 as a patrol deputy. I worked for a few years as an undercover narcotics cop for the state of Wyoming. After that, I came back to patrol. From that point, I graduated up through the rank of corporal to sergeant. I was an FTO. I managed the FTO program. I was on the SWAT team. I worked up to the rank of lieutenant, and then in 2002, I ran for the office of sheriff. I'm just finishing my 12th year as sheriff. As you might imagine, in that amount of time period, there's been a lot of changes in law enforcement in Laramie County, but not just law enforcement, and the population that we deal with today and the issues that we deal with. They're all encompassing too. I mean, when you think about a sheriff, you know, most people just understand the patrol part of it, the patrol cars that you see out on the streets. But there are many parts. Think about the jail across the street back behind us here to the west. As of today, there was 290 inmates in that jail that we're responsible for. That building over there is a city unto itself. That building was built in 1989, and we've been responsible for it since. So as you think about the sheriff and the position, think about the graduation up through the roles that these candidates, myself included and my opponent, have attained through their careers, and the fact that all of my law enforcement experience has been here in Laramie County. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin, 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is David Martin, and I am running for Laramie County Sheriff. My wife and I grew up here in Laramie County. We've been married 21 years. We have 4 children. I have 13 years of law enforcement experience. I was a sergeant. I also was a field training officer. During that time, you know, I've also attended advanced leadership courses through the departments. And I just have a different direction that I want to lead the Sheriff's Department in. You know, right now we have 5 unmarked cars that are not being utilized to their potential. You know, I'm going to be a working sheriff. I'm going to be in uniform every day supporting my people. And that's a big benefit. They need leadership. And right now, we don't have leadership. And that's what's frustrating our people. Today, we have 4 deputies coming out working the swing shift for all of Laramie County. That's it, until 8 o'clock. We cannot serve and protect the community and the people of Laramie County with that many deputies. In the last 2.5 years, we've had 18 deputies, patrol deputies, quit. 28 jail deputies quit. We need to stop that. We need to exercise retention. And I know how to do that, and I know how to fix it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Now we'll go to the questions. And we'll start with Mr. Martin. We'll alternate here who starts. What recommendations would you make to the county commissioners to improve the effectiveness of the Sheriff's Department?
Well, again, we need to inform the commissioners, you know, that we are short of deputies right now. We need to exercise retention. Yeah, some of it has to do with their salaries. You know, we're not getting paid like we should be for our skill sets. You know, deputies, you know, they have a lot of responsibility. You know, we have the chance, you know, we could violate somebody's constitutional rights. We take people's freedoms away when we arrest people. And heaven forbid if we have to use lethal force. We have to have qualified people to make those decisions. Otherwise, that is a big liability for the people of Laramie County. The cost of replacing these deputies that I just mentioned that are leaving it's taken away from other funding for the people. You know, roads, improvements on our buildings. These deputies leaving are costing us over $20,000 per deputy to replace them. And so we just have to make sure that we keep them, because right now we're strictly a reactive department. We're not proactive. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Glick.
Thank you. You know, in working with the commissioners, and they're well aware of this, we've had many meetings over the issues that we face with manning and the potential that we have on the streets. You know, if you look at rural and western United States, what they average is about 2.5 deputies per 1,000 people. We've been averaging about 1.4 for some years now. In fact, we've only been able to put new people on the streets because of COPS grants or federal grant monies, because Laramie County didn't have the money at the time to put those new bodies on the streets. Retention is a big thing. I will agree with my opponent. I had a guy walk in the other day and say I quit because I wouldn't change his shift for the third time. I had another one quit. We've lost 4 this week that wanted to search something else. I had another one go full-time guard. We work to try and keep our people. Our people are very, very vital to the operation of the Laramie County Sheriff's Office. But that's a tough job, and some people are just not made up for it. We had one that went into the jail, was fully trained, went through the FTO program, and when they turned him loose in one of those big cell blocks up there with the inmates, he beat his training officer to the door saying, "I can't do this alone." It takes a lot to be a sheriff's deputy, not only anywhere else, but especially here in Laramie County where we expect so much, and we do work to keep them.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, you want to take a couple of seconds to respond?
Yes, I do. The county did have money because last year the current sheriff created an undersheriff's position that cost the county $83,249. That would put 2 more patrol deputies out to help protect and serve the people of Laramie County. So there apparently was funding, but it was used for another administration spot.
And the Sheriff Glick, you want to
If I
respond?
may. You know, and that's a false statement. That position was there and funded for $81,000 for the captain's position. And what we had to have, because we lost a detention captain, is somebody that could sit in the middle that had the experience from both sides of the house to generalize and move the resources, monies, and people forward. So that statement is completely false.
Could I rebut one more time, please?
Sure, we have the time. I would say we'll give each of you one more chance, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Okay. I can go ahead and rebut then?
Yes, you
Okay.
can.
Well, I have the budget right here, and we're paying our captain and our undersheriff that same amount of money. So whether or not you didn't have, I've been here 2.5 years, and we didn't have an undersheriff until last year. My point is we're top-heavy as it is. We need people out on the streets.
And Sheriff Glick, if you want to briefly respond?
Thank you, and it will be brief. Top-heavy. There's a span of control that has to take place. The Laramie County Sheriff's Office has 200 employees. You know, when you've got 8 guys out on the streets, you have a sergeant. When you have 4 or 5 sergeants in operations and that many in detention, you have to have a lieutenant. The captains overrun the specific budgets to each. So, you know, yes, there's a span of control, but if he's talking just operations, our lieutenants are out pulling calls right now. In fact, had I not hurt my hand, I was going out and take calls out in the rural areas myself. So that's not completely true.
And that's not true what
Okay,
you
well,
just said
and
either.
I'll just say that if you have more to say on the topic, maybe you can do that at the 2-minute
Thank you.
wrapping up at the end. We'll just move on at this point. And this is about, do you think the present budget for the Sheriff's Department is adequate to provide for law enforcement and protection to the residents of eastern Laramie County? And we've talked about the retention, a little bit issue here. Maybe talk about other parts of the budget, whether it's adequate or not. And so we'll cover that. And I'm trying to think. I guess we'll start with Sheriff Glick here, since we started with Mr. Martin before.
Thank you. I think this goes back to the fact that you need to look at the growth in Laramie County. The Laramie County growth has gone completely out into the rural areas. In fact, every new plat that is being proposed comes across my desk for review. And on every one, I write in the fact that we need more deputies when people move out there. And you put 200 homes 20 miles out into the county. You know, at one time we used to run with 1 or 2 deputies east. We didn't have a west deputy. We finally got a west deputy. We worked to build the rural portion of the Laramie County Sheriff's Department, both east and west. And we had sufficient numbers. I ended up with a deputy that was injured west. I had another one that just retired on FMLA because of a family issue. You know, he's up against his time. We had one from the east side that was just pregnant and had a baby, and she was off on FMLA to take care of that newborn. There are struggles across the board. One thing we need to look at is, yes, we have responsibilities out there, and I agree with that. In fact, we worked with Burns to create a contract to put a deputy out there a certain number of hours a day. We made the same proposal to Pine Bluffs. We made the same proposal to Albin. So we're working with folks, but in many cases, many times, when you're up in that rural area, and my opponent can attest to this, I'm sure, if you're in Albin, you're going to get a call in Carpenter, and you're going to travel to get to it. So it becomes quite an issue to try and get proper coverage out there, and I don't know what specific number that would be, but as the population grows, so does our responsibility.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Martin, do you want me to repeat the question, or
No,
it's about
I
resources? And okay, thank you.
No, it's not sufficient. And right now we have 3 deputies that work Eastern Laramie County. I'm one of them. We're slotted for 4, but because of manning, we don't get that 4th person. We barely can cover South Greeley Highway right now. Last month, there was a time that there was only 1 deputy and a trainee going out for a swing shift. You know, last week alone, it took 35 minutes. We had an attempted suicide north of Burns. It took 35 minutes for our officers to respond and to arrive there. That's unacceptable. It comes down to management of your people. Again, he has 5 administrative people that can work the streets, and they refuse to. I've asked a lieutenant specifically on numerous occasions, you need to help out your guys. We're getting slammed out here. And they will not work the streets. So it just comes down to management of people. I have a new system. I have 85% of the department behind me. They believe in my goals and in my objectives.
Okay, and a brief response if you want to take this opportunity.
Thank you. You know, I don't understand if he's gone to those lieutenants and asked them, you know, for the most part until this manning became an issue, they did spend their time on the lot. But they're both in uniform and out there as covering shifts all the time. So I don't quite understand what my opponent is referring to. Thank you.
And the
Can I rebut that
briefly?
one?
Yes.
Okay. I actually work the streets. I see what's going on. They are not working the streets. Maybe once in a while, I'll give you that. But they're not. And I don't understand. As an elected official, as the head of the department, why aren't they working?
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. And again, if you have more to say on that topic, certainly have that
Sure.
opportunity at the end. Okay, and this time starting with Mr. Martin. Describe what you believe to be the effect, if any, on law enforcement caused by the energy development in eastern Laramie County.
It's very significant. Right now we're fighting more traffic from the trucks and the pickups, you know, going up and down the roads, going to these oil wells. Last week I got a hold of Trooper King, and we were going to work, we're in the process of working together possibly on enforcing overweight limits. He told me that the Highway Patrol has received numerous complaints on these county roads for being overweight. That is destroying our county roads. So as law enforcement, we need to be out there making sure that those trucks and everything in between are abiding by the law. You know, they're creating man camps, and along with those man camps, they're like little villages, come disturbances, alcohol related. I'll give you an example. Last year I was at a Burns High School football game in uniform, and there was a male subject there that was drinking alcohol at the football game, and he was from a man camp. I ended up arresting him and charging him with DUI and taking him to jail. So it's had a significant impact out there in eastern Laramie County.
Thank you. Sheriff Glick?
Thank you, ma'am. Sometime back, we sat down with the commissioners when we realized that the energy boom was going to start hitting Laramie County and starting to prepare for the effects it was going to have. I mean, we worked on the traffic portions of it. We also worked on the infrastructure and how it was going to affect us, not just on the roadways, but on everything, and specifically for the Laramie County Sheriff's Office across the board. You start talking about detention issues, you start talking about more paperwork, and if you look at, and I've been in contact with the sheriff up in Williams County, North Dakota, the man camp issues. We brought that up, and we even sat down with the oil companies that were coming in here and looking, and their landmen, and looking at how we could combat these issues that were going to come up. You know, we came to a consensus at that time that we were going to start out behind, and that was just the way it was going to be. I've dealt with a lot of those folks out there with the complaints about the trucks running up and down the roads. In fact, I've been out there myself. We've already worked with the Highway Patrol to put up weigh stations. We've got another weigh station stop point. I was just down to Carpenter the other day seeing the trucks come across. We're talking about putting one up down there with the patrol's help. So we've been involved with this from the beginning. In fact, even before it got way ahead of us. But yes, we've got some real issues here. And if some of the issues in Colorado take place with the fracking and the shutdown down there, the potential for that to move up here is going to be large, very large. Thank you.
Thank you. Either want to add anything more to that?
No.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on. Excuse me. Question 4. If you are elected or re-elected, how would the Sheriff's Department coordinate with the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security and other agencies to provide emergency response preparedness for Laramie County?
Well, Ms. Marguerite, we already do that. We've done that for a long time. We have worked with the emergency management group here in Laramie County, Rob Cleveland. We've sat down with Homeland Security. We've sat down with Highway Patrol, CPD, and any other agency that is around, even up to and including the National Guard. And we've had readiness tests where we put them on out to LCCC. And we work with the CDC in case something happens to where we work with that. So Homeland Security is just part of an MOU group, if you will, Memorandum of Understanding, that we've been working with from the get-go. This isn't something new. This is something that's been going on for years and years and years now. In fact, there's even classes put on out to LCCC that is through the Homeland Security and our support through law enforcement that work towards emergency preparedness as we speak.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Martin.
Well, again, I think it comes down to building relationships with Homeland Security, sharing information, communicating. You know, and a good example is the tornado a couple weeks ago. You know, I've talked to our sergeants, and you know, we're not ready. If that tornado would have hit, I'm sorry, we're not ready. As frontline officers and supervisors, we're not ready to adequately protect and serve the public in their needs in a crisis situation like that. And we need to be. We need to be proactive. We need to be prepared. We need to see down the line, you know, how and why or how we're going to fix this. And again, that comes down to building positive relationships and training. Now, I just spoke to some committee members out at LCCC myself, and Mr. Glick is right. They did some trainings out there, but it was just classroom training. It's not actual training. I was involved in a bomb scare out there here a few months ago, and it was just chaos out there. Everybody was running everywhere, and we need to implement practical trainings.
All right, thank you.
If I may,
Please
Miss
respond.
Marguerite, you know, that's not true. The training that I discussed where we had guard and EMS and et cetera respond out there was a full day where we had a fake bomb go off and a release of a toxin, and we worked through it from the beginning to the end. We worked through it from the initial call to where we were supposedly transporting people to the hospitals We even worked to the point to where we could bring an airlift in. So this has been an actual physical exercise that has been done. And we do the same across the board. I mean, there's tornado watchers training that the emergency management puts on that all of our deputies are welcome to go to, and we urge them to do so.
Briefly, do you have something there?
Welcome to go to. I don't agree with welcome to go to. I think that should be mandatory, so that way we're all prepared. Because we're so down on manning right now. I mean, we don't have time, but we should be implementing so many deputies to those trainings because we have to be prepared for a crisis like that.
Okay, and again, if you have anything more to say on this topic, certainly have the last 2 minutes to wrap up comment. The final question I prepared that we gave you in advance, and then we'll start with Mr. Martin. What has been your experience in law enforcement, and how would that experience make you the best person to be elected to the office of sheriff? And I know you both touched on experience, the opening, but it gives you room to amplify on that here.
Right. Well, when I first started in law enforcement, I worked in the jail. So I'm familiar with jail operations too. Then I went out to the road and I worked the road. But my first career in law enforcement was in Colorado, and it was a smaller department. Public relations is very, very important. I think it's important for the deputies to have a great relationship with the public, gaining their trust and support. I will bring that to this department. The number one complaint I hear from the deputies that work the jail is they never see the sheriff in the jail himself. And that's sad because all they want is to see their leader supporting them. And, if you don't have the support from your leader, then you don't have hope and you don't have encouragement. And I'm going to do that. That's why I say I'm going to be a working sheriff, and I'm going to take care of my people and the people in Laramie County, along with the people that travel through Laramie County.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Glick.
The experiences I've had that have led me to this position and to make me feel that I'm the best candidate for re-election in this case is that I've worked with all facets of the administration of the Laramie County Sheriff's Office. And this is the only place I've worked. I've not worked anywhere else. I've watched this agency grow. But I've also worked with other agencies through the Sheriff's Association, where I was president, through the Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, where I was president. And one of the things that we look at is, yes, you can be a leader, but you have to be a leader that is mentoring and bringing the best to the table, almost a best practices type situation. And that's what we've done. I mean, through the training we've done through the academy up in Douglas, through the trainings we've done here. In the old days, we didn't do train the trainer. We didn't participate in that. We've had to, through budgetary constraints, if we send people to training, they have to be able to come back and train everybody so we can bring everybody up to speed. There are a number of programs that we've implemented by doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Opportunity to respond. Does anyone want to add anything?
No.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to questions from the audience, and one is about the problem with turnover, which you both adequately, but just maybe an aspect of that, it sounds like part of the issue is perhaps attracting not just quality candidates, but also suitable, as you mentioned, that some people come to it and they're not cut out for it. Can any improvements be made in the initial hire to make sure that they are going to stay and put some of that resources you've invested in them to use? And I guess we'll, I forget whose turn it is to start. I believe it's Mr. Martin's turn, or?
It doesn't matter, but is that okay?
Please.
Okay. Well, our hiring process is broken right now. Our website isn't up to date as far as being attractive to new applicants. There's a lot of things on there that we don't use. When you want to be a cop, you don't do it for the money, okay? I mean, you want to be paid for your skills and that kind of thing, but you do it because you want to make a change in the community that you live in. So we have to hire people with that perspective. And right now, I mean, I want to change our hiring process to where we create an eligibility list. We go out and we seek people, and I don't understand why we're not going out and trying to get the veterans that are returning from our wars overseas. They're wanting a career in law enforcement, but we're not doing that. And they live right here. They're already involved in our city, in our county. They know what it's like to live here. And so that's one thing I would change.
All right, thank you. Mr. Glick?
Well,
Initial hire, that part of the process.
Thank you. One thing that I take offense with is the fact that we wouldn't hire a veteran. In fact, we work extensively. We've even listed out on the base. We've been to Fort Carson. In fact, when we go to hiring fairs or job fairs, the fairs we go to, the first hour or so are dedicated strictly to our veterans. We believe in our veterans, their leadership, their capabilities because of what they've been through. And although we won't make an exception because we won't lower our standards, but we will give them a preference if they come to this agency, and always will, as long as I'm here. You know, the hiring practices for the sheriff's office are good hiring practices. The trouble is across the country right now, and I mean this is across the country, but specifically in our state, we have a small hiring pool anyway. But we've hired from Colorado, we've hired from, been into Nebraska. We go all over trying to hire. We've hired from both sides of the country trying to get people here. It's not that we're limited or limiting ourselves. It's just that it is a tough job, and quite frankly, we don't pay as well as a lot of other jobs, and we're not as lucrative as we used to one time be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Opportunity to respond further?
But I think, you know, again, I mean, how come Cheyenne PD can have 50, 60 people show up? Granted, they do pay more than we do, but we need to advertise. You know, we have benefits for the county. I mean, you don't have to live in Cheyenne. You can live anywhere in the county and still be a deputy. You know, Cheyenne has limitations, but yet they still have 50 to 60 people show up on a testing. And it's because, unfortunately, we have gained the reputation of being a training department. And, you know, we need to change that. I want to change that, where we're the model for all law enforcement agencies. And we can do that.
If
Mr.
I may.
Glick? Yes.
You know, it's easy to say that 50 people are going to come and test. The trouble is what you have to look at is they'll get one qualified candidate out of 50 people. That's, again, across the board. We've got a mass testing coming up, but, you know, the other day we hired 4 people, and we're going to start them out in training. So it's not that we're not trying and we're not being innovative and we're not reaching out, and that somehow the Laramie County Sheriff's Office is somehow substandard. The processes we have in place over there are held in regard across this state and actually in the region. We're looked to because of how innovative we are and what we do bring to the table and what we give to our people. So I think it's unfair when you try and single out the fact that we lose people. It's not just Laramie County. This is law enforcement across the board, across the nation right now, fighting to keep these people. And when you've got that many people that many agencies trying to hire that many people, and we can't pay like other agencies can, we become second fiddle sometimes. I mean, we had a detective, I think he was a 7-year vet, that over a pay issue walked out and went to the Cheyenne Police Department. That's happened throughout my career. In the 30-plus years I've been here, people have left Laramie County to go to another agency. So yeah, maybe we are a training ground. But look what they're hiring. They're hiring Laramie County deputies, and I think that puts them above standard. We've got a core group that carries this agency, and we work with that core group, and they're dandies.
All right, thank you. And again, if you have more to say on the issue, you have the closing. We may expand the closing because right now it's getting full of issues. But the next question then, and we'll start with Mr. Glick. How will you address jurisdictional issues with the Wyoming Highway Patrol on water and other trucks illegally dumping hazardous loads?
You know, having been one of those guys out there and handling one of those calls, in fact, if I remember right, it might have been on Kirkbride property that we had one of those rig trucks come up and dumping into one of their stock ponds. What we have to do is, if those waters are being dumped illegally, we have to be notified because we have to have legal presence. And working with Highway Patrol, we've never had an issue with that. We've always had an understanding. In fact, we've got an MOU in place with the Wyoming Highway Patrol, Cheyenne Police Department, and ourselves right now to work DUIs. That's just an extension. If we're asked to participate, we will participate. If it becomes aware to us, we know how to reach out to DEQ to help ourselves get out of that problem and make that positive response.
Okay. Mr. Martin, you want me to repeat the question? Do you have it? Or?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Mr. Glick is right. I agree with that. But it just comes down to, again, you know, that would work if we had our people, you know, and again, building a relationship with the Highway Patrol. Like I said earlier in this debate, you know, I had a trooper come to me and ask me for help, and that's the same thing. But you know, it's frustrating because I actually work the street and I know what it's like when you got these calls and you can't get to them because we're just so busy.
Okay, thank you. Any opportunity to respond? Or
If I may, and briefly. You know, one thing that we would never limit a deputy to is obviously if he's asked for assistance or he comes upon another law enforcement officer in this county and that officer needs assistance, I would be very disappointed and there'd be a lot of explanation take place on why he didn't jump in and assist. You know, you have to prioritize. That's something that we all have done over the years. You know, the Laramie County Sheriff's Office has never had a fat shift, never. We've always scrambled with 1 or 2 or 3 people throughout the years, and we had to prioritize. And we expect deputies to do that again now, or continue to do it.
Add something at this point?
Yeah. The thing is again, when your deputies are responding from town, okay, and if that happens up on Kirkbride's property or whatever, I mean, we're talking 50 minutes. And I'm not saying we wouldn't back up any other law enforcement agency. I'm just saying, as of today, we're not to that point. I mean, how can we when we have 3, 4 guys on that are just running all over the place?
All righty, thank you. And we'll, next question. And at this point, we'll start with Mr. Martin. Are you planning to change the way marijuana possession arrests are handled? It's kind of a question that came up during the DA forum, but how to handle, especially in light of the marijuana for sale very close to our state line.
Yeah. Marijuana, I mean, again, that's going to be like officer discretion because it's going to depend on the amount they have. If it's a felony amount, that'll be arrest. But no, not really. We need to be more proactive. One thing I want to change is, speaking of marijuana, is, we need to be advertising, on TV and on the radio. You always hear, we're going to be out on task force, for DUI, alcohol related. Well, we need to emphasize now being impaired by marijuana is just like being impaired by alcohol, along with prescription drugs. So we need to take in the whole picture and look at it that way.
Okay, Mr. Glick.
Thank you. About 3 weeks ago, I was doing interviews out to DCI for advancements out there. And I've been in contact with Kevin Haller and Woody, the director of DCI. And we've talked about creating the task force to target marijuana coming back into this county. but not just this county, this state. Marijuana out of Colorado right now is traveling across the country. It's not just here. If you talk to the chief up in Gillette, Jim Local, he's got it up there. If you talk to Nebraska sheriffs, their call load for marijuana has gone up twofold. This is an issue. We have worked hard in law enforcement in Laramie County and the state of Wyoming to influence DUIs, impaired driving. Now, all of a sudden, because of a decision to a state to our south, we have to worry about that. When you look at the issues down there with marijuana and what's going to potentially come back here, and it's here. And we are working it, by the way. We have drug dogs. We've always worked it, and we won't make exceptions. Laws are laws. If you knowingly go down there and bring marijuana back to this state in violation of our law, you will be cited and or arrested, whichever fits that contact.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add at this point?
No.
Okay. We had a question about what are the duties of the sheriff, but let me just expand on that a little bit. Maybe you could talk about what qualities are really necessary and valuable in a sheriff, considering Laramie County and the size of the job and the difficulty of the job. And I guess we'll start with Mr. Glick.
Thank you. Well, it's almost too broad to describe in a minute and 30 seconds. You have to look at everything, and you have to take everything into account. I mean, you have your responsibility to the citizens that elect you to office. You have the responsibility to the people that travel through the state and the county. You have responsibility to your officers, your deputies. And you also have a responsibility to be proactive in the programs that you bring here that are going to be representative of the stances of our laws. I mean, we have many programs here, and I don't think I can get it done in a minute and 30 seconds, which is probably now 30 seconds. But in the closing, I'll describe some of the programs that we've implemented here. And I think that's what you need to do, is you need to be proactive. You have to have an open mind, but you also have to have a mentorship mentality in what you're doing. The training portion of what we give deputies. But you also have to work to elevate those deputies, because someday you're going to retire. And you need somebody there to replace you. And I think that's what you need to do as a sheriff, is to elevate everybody. So when you finally step away, you have somebody there that is befitting to take your place and carry on. Now, you can change programs, but to still carry on the heritage that comes with being a sheriff in Wyoming and how we're looked up to across the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, the qualities, necessary qualities of a good sheriff for Laramie County?
Well, first of all, I think you have to start off with integrity, morals, and ethics. You have to start off with being a good leader, leading by example. That again, I just believe that your people that work for you respect when you're out in the field with them and you learn and you know what's going on out there. There is a lot of responsibilities. You have the patrol side, you have the jail, you have the juvenile center, and all these other issues. But you also have to be able to work with other departments. Cheyenne Police Department, Pine Bluffs Police Department, the Wyoming Highway Patrol, Homeland Security, Fire Department. You have to have good working relationships to be able to serve the public, make sure they're safe, make sure that their concerns are being met. And right now, we don't have a good relationship with Cheyenne Police Department, Pine Bluffs Police Department. We're locked out of Fire District 1. So we have to rebuild those. And I currently have built a relationship with Chief Kozak, Chief Taylor, for example, and they're excited to work with me.
Thank you. You want to respond briefly, Mr. Glick?
Well, I think, when you look at that and you pick out individual agencies, I can't believe that it would be isolated to the Cheyenne Police Department or the Pine Bluff Police Department. At one time, the current chief down there wanted help And we took our whole policy and procedures manual down there. We offered training for all our officers down there. We offered the same to Burns and ended up eventually taking over law enforcement there. The Cheyenne Police Department, the chief and I mean, we just signed an MOU. We've got joint teams with the Cheyenne Police Department for EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, bike patrol, mounted units, across the board. So I don't quite understand that. I backed up highway patrol officers coming to work when they're stopped along the road. I don't think that there's quite the problems that you're hearing here on us getting along.
Okay. Do you want to take this opportunity or save it for later?
I just know there is because I've talked to those individuals myself.
Okay, thank you. We just got a question about that, which is more sort of information, which could be useful to our audience, which is not necessarily the ones here, about pot impairment. That how it would, if a person has consumed pot previously, and I guess we'll start with Mr. Glick on this one. So how do you test for the substance if none is present physically?
What you have to do, and I don't know if I've got the full gist of that question.
It was mentioned about pot impairment. How can you test for the substance if none is present physically?
What you look for, and the gentleman that I explained earlier walked in, and because he couldn't get the specific shift that he wanted quit, was our DRE instructor. And when this became an issue down in Colorado, and we saw that...
What again? Can you say?
Drug recognition expert. I apologize. Sometimes you get talking that cop talk. My bad. But what you do is you train your deputies up to be experts in that field, and they are actually called in when there's the suspect there who they think is impaired other than alcohol. So usually with marijuana you have the odor of, but now with the edibles that are out there and etc., that may not be the case. So that's what you're going to do, and we'll continue on working towards the DRE, or drug recognition experts, and get a team together so we can handle those issues. The great thing about it is we have a MOU in place to where we can call upon the police department if we can't get one of our own gentlemen out there, own deputies out there.
Okay, I don't know, Mr. Martin, if you want to address this question, it's kind of procedural, but if you take the opportunity.
There's just a few more indicators that you can look at if you stop somebody that you believe is impaired by marijuana. You know, first of all, pupil size, the eyelid tremors. You know, they're going to show the same signs as somebody that is under the influence of alcohol. In other words, their movements are going to be slow. And far as testing, you know, you can, after they, if they fail the roadside maneuvers that you instruct them through, then you take them down to the hospital, and then you get a chemical test.
All right. You wanted to respond anymore, or can we move on?
I think we beat that one to death.
I think so. Well, it's information. It's a good FYI. And the final question before we close is, and you kind of alluded to it, but this directly, and I guess we'll start with Mr. Martin. What role does a sheriff play or should play in law enforcement organizations at the state or national level?
Well, again, the state being in contact with your legislatures, you know, letting them know, for example, you know, these marijuana issue, do we need to stiffen the penalties, you know, which if we're going to have that kind of influx, I think we should. But, you know, being involved in that area, for example. The national level, you know, again, you know, Mr. Glick, you know, he goes to the National Sheriff's Association, and I'm not saying that's bad, okay? There is good things there, and that's where everybody gets together and learns each other's departments and what's affecting them. And there's just other conferences and things that you can go to as well.
Thank you, Mr. Glick.
Thank you. You know, in the sheriffs of Wyoming have gotten together and we took a stance on the legalization of marijuana. And we do work through training and advanced training and et cetera. But it isn't just here. You know, we lobby at the legislature. Last year I lobbied, one of our representatives wanted to decriminalize marijuana, and I was steadfast against that. And we lobbied at the legislature, personally I did, against that stance. But see, one of the things that you need to realize is this isn't just Wyoming, it's regional and national. And that's where, by being involved with these other associations, the Western State Sheriff's Association and the National Sheriff's Association, really come into fruition, if you will. My involvement with the National Sheriff's Association allows us, through our lobbyists back there who are in Washington, D.C., to reach out and work with the congressional delegations that are there to tell them the issues that we're facing out here, the increased percentages of juveniles being harmed down in Colorado with impaired driving wrecks, and that we don't believe in this, and that law enforcement, sheriffs across the United States, although ACP also takes a similar stance than the chiefs of police, we have to stand up for these issues, and we have to reach out through these organizations that reach farther than Laramie County, Wyoming, etc., and be able to reach back into D.C. to tell them how we are out here, because if we don't have that voice, if we don't make our voice heard, we fail. They run over top of us because of broad brush strokes that they take that affect us.
Thank you. Do you want to respond? Have anything to add at this point?
Yeah, I mean, that part's true, but I think it's important for the sheriff to be in the county, you know, the majority of the time, knowing exactly what's going on as far as marijuana, being out in the community, not just here in Cheyenne, but eastern, western, Laramie County as well, because we do have issues, and we have to be here to be able to recognize that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Glick, do you have anything to add at this point?
And not at this time. I'll save it for the 2 minutes.
All right. So that concludes the questions, and since there seems to be a fair amount of back and forth, I think what we'll start with 2 minutes each, and then if you want to take an additional minute after that to respond what the other has said. So we'll get a back and forth going if you choose to use your time that way. And so we'll start with 2 minute summaries, or if you want to address something that hasn't come up or add to it, understanding that you'll have another minute after that to respond to the other. But I think it's really been a good evening. We've seen a lot of contrast in the candidates, and the voters are going to have a lot to choose from. So I guess we'll start with Mr. Glick, the 2 minutes, if you want to take that now.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. You know, you've heard here tonight that the sky is falling. The sky is not falling. We have deputies, we're hiring deputies, we're working to hire deputies, and we're responsive to the needs of the people in Laramie County. But again, you heard me say prioritize. When you call me, if you call me with an issue, your issue is the only issue that's important at the moment. And sometimes we can't get there just because of the setting of this county. It's not that somebody has to come from the headquarters district to run east, headquarters being the Cheyenne area. It wouldn't matter if, as I said earlier, if you were in Carpenter, you'll get a call in Albin, and sometimes we can respond from town just about as fast, or on the eastern part of town. You know, we take this into consideration. Those complaints come across my desk. I talk to those people personally, and we work to remediate them. Sometimes we can't just come to that understanding. That's just the way it goes sometimes, but it's not because of lack of trying. You know, this is the best trained organization in the state. Our policies and procedures, our way of doing things, are used as a guide across the state. We're going through struggles right now with Manning, but this isn't the only time. This has been cyclic forever. Forever we've had issues. Even back when I first started in 1981, when we had 18 deputies to run this county. If we lost one deputy at that time, we were crippled. We've come a long way, and we'll continue to carry forward and I'll probably save the rest for that last minute.
All right, thank you. Mr. Martin, 2 minutes.
Well, again, I think it comes down to management, managing your people. Again, you know, why we're running around 5 unmarked cars. We all know that the number one deterrence of crime is visibility. 5 cars just being used for take home. You know, that's a waste of taxpayer dollars. I'm going to change that. Like I said, I'm going to be in uniform. My people, my administration is going to be in uniform. I'm going to have working lieutenants that actually pull shifts. They're not going to work just day shift. They're going to actually, one of my lieutenants is going to actually work a night shift. So we have coverage. You know, it's frustrating because, again, you know, working out east, we just need to restructure. One thing that I will do is I will restructure our area patrols. Right now, east basically starts 4 miles west of the TA, runs all the way to the Nebraska-Wyoming line, all the way north to Goshen County, and all the way south. That is a big area. So one of 2 things is going to have to happen to be able to protect and serve the people out in eastern Laramie County, for example, is either restructure our areas of patrol or add more people out there. Because it's not fair. And it's not fair to the west people or further north up on Horse Creek and that area. But it comes down to management of your people, and I can do that.
Thank you. Mr. Glick, if you want to take an extra minute.
Thank you. You know, it's not just about east and west, and it's like I explained earlier. You know, if your call is your call, it's very important to you. But you also, through management and leadership, have to understand that the bulk of the calls in Cheyenne, Laramie County, Wyoming are in the south area. And sometimes people get tied up. You know, my opponent has been pulled into town to work shifts in here just because. And then have to respond out. That's just the way it is. That's the only way we're able to do it with the numbers we have. It's not that we have a influx of people that we're hiding somewhere. I drive an unmarked car myself. And I'll tell you, eastern Laramie County knows that Danny Glick is out there, because if you break the law, whether it's unmarked or not, you'll see those flashing lights in your rearview mirror. Or if you're broke down, I'm there with you.
All right, thank you. And you have a minute if you want to take it, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, well, the truth of the matter is as far as the influx of people, we don't. I mean, it just comes down. I'm not saying that South Greeley Highway is less important to me. All I'm saying is we're not like Cheyenne PD where we're expected to get to a call in 1 and 2 minutes. If we manage our people and put them out for out in the county, so everybody is more broad, is spread out, instead of just staying on South Greeley Highway, being reactive, waiting for calls, you know, that's just better management. That makes, you know, you're spread out better instead of just being down on South Greeley Highway.
Okay, I think that's the end of our time, and I think we've had a good discussion tonight, good debate of the issues. I appreciate everyone, all the questions people brought, and again, you can, we'll be posting this if you want to refer your friends to it or watch it again. It'll be on our website, and it will be broadcast. This one tonight, for the 3 tonight, will be rebroadcast on Sunday, July 13th at 11 a.m. So if you want to encourage other people to watch as well. And I want to thank the candidates. If we give them a hand for showing up. Thank you all, and good night.
Don't stick your hand out. I can't shake that hand.